Hey guys, it's the pasty white miniature strongman, the J-Span, back with you guys. We're a day removed from the 2023 World's Strongest Man, and I thought it might be fun for us to do a tier where we take all 24 men who have worn the banner of World's Strongest Man, and then we rank them to see really how I feel about how they stack up. Now it's not exactly 1 through 24. Maybe we do that later. I don't know. But I kind of want to explain what we're doing, the chart behind me, and everything of that nature. There are a couple things that I want to point out. Keep in mind, it's just my opinion. It's no more valid than yours, no less valid than yours either. For everyone who wants to come to the comments and be a hater and tell me how much I don't know what I'm talking about and what I'm smoking and all of that stuff. What I will say is, if you have not liked or subscribed, now might be a good time to do that. And if you agree with everything I say in the comments, be a yes man, put that in the comments. More importantly, if you disagree with me, don't just tell me I'm fat and ugly. Those things may be true, but there's nothing to do with my opinion. So in the comments, go ahead and let me know where I got it wrong, who should have fallen in each group, and why. Now, that being said, I think this will be a fun video. So again, what we've got is we've got 6 categories, as you can see over on what is really my right, but in terms of the mirror, it's going to be to the left over here. So what we've got is we've got 6 categories. Starting at the top, we have Gods of Strength. Then we have A-plus players, B-plus players, Fortunate, Unlucky, and the rest. Now, I'm going with a few ground rules for this, which I may or may not stick to. So these are loose rules. But I want to explain a few things. First of all, these guys have all been World's Strongest Man. So you can make a reasonable argument that they're all Gods of Strength and A-plus players, right? But then that would be a pretty stupid tier. So we've got to find some ways to differentiate them. Second of all, I want to talk about how a couple of these labels over here, fortunate and unlucky. Okay, now with fortunate and unlucky, I'm going to use this to kind of differentiate from the rest, and then who we really consider the creme de la creme. Now you could make an argument that any of the guys in Gods of Strength, A-plus players and B-plus players, where we wind up putting them, could also be fortunate or unlucky, as it were. For instance, we had basically Brian Shaw and Zydrunas Savickas going up against one another head to head in most of their primes, and they both managed to get 4 titles apiece. You could make a very compelling argument that that was incredibly unlucky. If either of those guys hadn't been in the other man's path, how many titles might they have won? But that's kind of what we're going to look at with fortunate and unlucky. And make no mistake about it, when I say that someone's fortunate, it's not meant to be disparaging. It's not meant to be insulting to them. It's all of these guys are deserving of praise. It simply means that they're fortunate. Maybe they got 1 or 2 titles, and I happen to believe that either historically speaking, if we look at the stats and everything, maybe it was sort of a weak lineup that year, or maybe it was a small competition. Maybe it was only a 6-man final, because that happened one time. We'll talk about that. Or or they were lucky to avoid a certain someone that year because that person might have been injured. So they kind of had some things going their way that helped them to the crown. Similar thing on unlucky. If they're on this list, they've already won some titles, so they've definitely had some things go their way. But maybe they could have had more titles or been lucky in other ways. Maybe again avoiding certain people like the Savickas Shaw thing, or maybe victims of some questionable judging or what have you. So everything that we're going to do is debatable. That's a long intro. Now what we need to do is actually put the information in. So let's do that. And for people who don't like long intros, I guess I'll go ahead and put a little timer in the description so you can skip that. Well, we've got everything here. You know I'm a big strongman nerd. I like stats and stuff. So I've also got some facts about World's Strongest Man that you might want to find interesting. I'll go ahead and post them here, and you guys can look at them as well as I go ahead and rank these. Now, as you look at the guys that we have here on the screen, you will notice that down here at the bottom, I don't know if you can see this. Apparently, I do not have it set to show the. There we go. Had to turn that on to show the arrows for you and the cursor. I think that's going to come in handy as I do this. But you'll see that the guys down here, the order that they're currently on the chart is from the time of their first title. So right off the bat, we've got Bruce Wilhelm was the first ever World's Strongest Man champion. So he's down here in the first spot. Mitchell Hooper won it yesterday, so that's the most recent one here. And for guys who won multiple titles, their position down here is based on when they won their first title. Hopefully that makes sense. So we're just going to drag them up there and decide where they should be. And I reserve the right to move them around 100 different times as we're making our way through the video. So just because someone lands in a place doesn't mean that's where they're ultimately going to be. All right. So Bruce Wilhelm, I feel like he won two titles, and that automatically sort of makes him a legend, right? I guess all of these guys sort of are legends in their own right, but this sort of makes him a legend because there can only be one for first. The first only comes along once. I also think that he is fortunate in that he's lucky in some ways that a lot of the guys who are coming on this list shortly down the screen hadn't arrived yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put Bruce Wilhelm in the fortunate column. And I do feel a little bit guilty doing that because, as I've already talked about, he was the first. So, but again, fortunate does not, it's not meant to be disparaging to these guys. As a matter of fact, you can even say being the first is one of the things that makes him fortunate or lucky. You've got to be kind of lucky to be the first one, and that's a nice little thing to have on your pedestal. So there we go. Now, I guess I really need to move the random SM facts down if I'm going to be complaining about that covering up the bottom of these. But I think I'm just going to leave stuff alone. You know what? No, I'm not, because I can't do that. That's just not who Jace is. You guys know how I am. Let me go ahead and move this around a little bit. There we go. You know, I'm crazy. I'm really picky about stuff like that. Okay, so then we had Don Reinhardt up next. And I think Don is another guy that we could say is sort of lucky. He's really lucky to have arrived at a time basically when Bruce decided that he was going to step away, and Bill Kazmaier hadn't really learned how to do anything yet. So this was, I believe, Don Reinhardt's one win was in 1979, and that's the first year that Bill Kazmaier had got there. He had just started competing in powerlifting and strength sports back in that time. So Bill Kazmaier came in third that year, and after that we know what Bill did. So I also kind of think that Don Reinhardt is he's both lucky and unlucky. Um, and I mean that because he was competing during a time when there was Bruce Wilhelm there, and Bruce made him the bridesmaid. Maybe Don Reinhardt would have two titles if Bruce hadn't been there. So it's kind of tough to know where to put fortunate. And another thing about fortunate, it doesn't mean, again, a lot of the A plus and B plus guys could be down here in fortunate or unlucky. So just because someone is unfortunate, that does not mean really that I'm saying that they were worse than the B plus or worse than the A plus. In fact, in some cases, fortunate may be better than A plus or B plus. There's a little bit of subjectivity here. But I think I'm going to take Don Reinhardt, and I'm going to say that he was a bit unlucky, even though you could make the argument again that he was lucky, because I just think that he might have more credentials based on his time in the sport if he had not crossed paths with guys named Bruce Wilhelm, Bill Kazmaier, Jeff Capes. So I think it's just a little bit unlucky there. Up next is Bill Kazmaier, and I don't know how you guys feel. Again, like I said, we can't put everybody up in Gods of Strength. I really want to keep Gods of Strength to no more than 5 at the very most. When this is all said and done, I'd like to only see 3 or 4 names up there. And for me, he's my all-time favorite strongman. And he was doing stuff at the time that no one else was doing. He was light years ahead of his competition at the time. Now we could talk about whether or not it was a true sport back then, or it was more like a hobby or a side thing, some kind of random one-off contest. We could have all these debates. But when you're that high above your peers, to me it stands out. Not only is he a legend, he's my favorite strongman of all time. He's one of the most influential guys in the history of the sport. He won 3, and they didn't invite him back for several years, as you know. After 3 titles in a row, maybe he could have had 4 titles in a row, 5 titles in a row. So we don't know. We know they stopped inviting him after his dominance. And so for these reasons and many others, I feel like Bill Kazmaier deserves one thing and one thing only, and that is to be a god of strength. And now we can see my little chart here is getting a bit distorted, so I need to move things around again. I apologize. All right, let's go here. Let's go here. Let's do this here. And let's get rid of this little save or download button that you guys don't need to be bothered with. All right, great. Next up on the list is Jeff Capes. Now, Jeff is an interesting story in Strongman, and he points to kind of what I was talking about with the sport sort of evolving quickly over the years. And in its infancy, it really wasn't the sport of strongman. It was a contest for some strong guys who had some sort of notoriety, fame, or got an invitation one way or another. Either they were powerlifters or football players or wrestlers or track and field athletes like Jeff Capes, and they got invited to compete for the world's strongest man. And so Jeff Capes is a two-time winner, and and did some really impressive things for a guy who was really just a track and field guy who wasn't necessarily a quote unquote power lifter, which was the guys who dominated back in those days. Excellent athlete, very strong man, and in the early years pretty influential. I believe he competed. I'm going to check because I don't want to say this. I believe he competed, however, in 7 different World's Strongest Mans. That's correct. Okay. He had competed in 7 World's Strongest Mans, which I think back in his time, that's one of the higher numbers. Very, very few guys competed in that many. And he walked away with 2 wins. Now, later we're going to also talk about how many finals and things they were in. In these early years, it's not really fair because there was no qualifier really to get there. So, like in Capes, 7 World's Strongest Man, but he didn't have to qualify to get there. So it is what it was, you know. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that Jeff Capes, 2 wins out of 7 appearances, early parts of the sport. I think I'm going to say that Jeff Capes belongs in. Oh, oh boy. Hmm. I think we'll go A plus. I think we'll go A plus. I mean, I can make an argument for Jeff and A plus, B plus, or the rest really. And again, maybe he might get moved around. Who knows? After that, we had Jean-Paul Sigmarsson, and he won 4 World's Strongest Man titles. John Paul Sigmarsson won in 84, actually. He won in January of 85, I believe, but that was the 1984 title. Actually, I need to bring up Strongman Archives on another screen so that I'm not guessing this stuff. Okay, again, yeah, that's right. So John Paul Sigmarsson actually won in January of 85, but that was the 1984 World's Strongest Man. Okay, so he was the winner in 1984. He was the winner in 1986, 1988, and then again in 1989 or 1990. So he was the first guy to win 4 titles. Before that, Kazmaier held the record at 3. I believe I'm going to put John Paul Sigmarsson in the same place that I put Jeff Capes. So I'm going to say those 4 victories make him an A plus player. I don't quite think that he's in the Gods of Strength category. A lot of you guys will put him there, and that's fine. But I'm giving him an A plus ranking. After we go with Sigmarsson, up next we have Jamie Reeves. And so Jamie Reeves, I believe, compete. Well, I don't want to believe again. Let me open this up. Okay, yeah, he competed in 3 World's Strongest Men. Now, at this point, they were starting to have other strength competitions throughout the world, really a couple years before this, and Jamie was competing in those. But he appeared in 3 World's Strongest Man finals, and he, of course, won one of them. Aside from that, Jamie had picked up he was your Britain's Strongest Man. He had won the IFSA Grand Prix in 1998. Granted, there were 3 men there. in that challenge. So you got that there. And let's see here. What else can we say about Jamie? So he was your 1988 Britain's Strongest Man. He, of course, was the 1989 World's Strongest Man. He won the 1992 World Mighty Man. I'm not even familiar with that one. It's rare that I see a contest that I'm not overly familiar with on the international scene. But apparently, Jamie Reeves is not only your world's strongest man, but he was also your world's mightiest man. Okay, and I'd say that's about where his accolades are. He's got the Britain's Strongest Man and the World's Strongest Man title. Now there is one thing that's interesting about him. He did win Britain's Strongest Man in 1988 and I believe in 1998. So yes, you can make the argument again. Early days of the sport wasn't up, but I think you got to give Jamie a lot of credit for coming back and still winning Britain's Strongest Man a decade later. As it is, I think I'm going to give Jamie my very first B plus player. It's going to be hard for anyone to get into the A plus or the Gods of Strength if they have not won multiple titles. In my opinion, again, you do your own tier. Tell me in the comments what I got wrong. But for me, it's going to be really hard for anyone that doesn't have multiple titles to get up into those first two categories. Sort of one of my soft rules here. Again, I may not obey it. We'll see how things shake out. In fact, I've already got one name in my mind with one title who may find himself in the A plus player category. He may not. I'll be wishy washy. I have that right when I'm the one doing this. Okay. So after Jamie Reeves, then we had the beginning of Magnus Magnussen's domination of the sport for about a 5-6 year period. So Magnus came and won the 1991 World's Strongest Man. That was his first one. Magnus won again in 94, 95, and 96. He did a three-peat there, 94, 95, 96. So he also took second in 92 and 93. So like I said, he had a 6 year in the sport there where he was pretty freaking amazing. And he's a legend for quite for some of those reasons. So Magnus for Magnussen, um, he's definitely going to one of the top two groups. I just have to decide how I'm going to do this really. Um, I think I'm going to put him in Gods of Strength. He can at least be on the screen there for a moment. He may or may not be in that position when all is said and done. Um, after Magnus for Magnussen's first victory, Ted Vandepar beat Magnus in 1992. This was Ted's only victory at the World's Strongest Man, beating Magnus in second and Jamie Reeves, who we already spoke about, in third place. In '92, I don't want to guess here, so I'm gonna go take a look at this real quick. In '92, Ted Vandepar. I already know where I want to put him, but I'm gonna see if I see things here that kind of sway me. In that contest, Ted Vandepar, he did some pretty impressive things with 3 event wins in the finals there, and Magnus managed 3 wins on his own. So it would seem that Ted was slightly more consistent in that event than was Magnus. But you could say the same thing about Jamie Reeves. In fact, you could say that Jamie Reeves was the most consistent performer in 1992 because these guys were deadlocked in points. You had Ted Vandepar winning the whole thing with 63, Magnus and Jamie tying with 62 points apiece. Magnus getting the win back then due to most event wins. Jamie, I don't believe, had a single win in anything. I'll check. No, he did not. He didn't win anything. But it still allowed him to be 1 point away from the title and to tie Magnus. So you could actually make a very strong argument, and I would agree that Jamie Reeves was probably the most consistent man in 1992. But that is Ted's one victory, and he had competed in a total of 3 World's Strongest Men. So He also competed in the international competitions 9 times, and he still only had the one win. So there was one year where Ted Van de Par was, I guess, super world class. The rest of the time, he he didn't really do that stuff. So you got to give him credit for showing up that one year. But all things going, all things being considered, I think I go ahead and I'm going to put Ted in the B plus, and I'm going to put him behind Jamie. Now, where they're positioned here, left and right within that rep, that's not really an official thing, but you can kind of look up there and be able to see where I look at them. I'm not going to fuss over that too much, but there's a little bit of that going on there. Okay, after we go with Ted Van de Par, then we go to Gary Taylor. Gary Taylor was always listed as being 6 feet tall. I don't believe it or buy it. I think, I'm super short. I'm less than 5.5 feet tall. And as I stream live, I've been told everybody should just round up no matter what. So they're saying I'm 6 feet tall. I don't need that. I'm secure in who I am and confident in who I am. I don't need to inflate my height. I'm like 5'3", 5'4". That's it. And I'm fine with it. I'm perfectly fine with it. I'm going to guess that Gary Taylor was probably around 5'10", maybe 5'11", but I really, again, I think he's probably around 5'10". I just don't believe the 6 foot. So he was always an undersized performer, but that did not stop him from doing well based upon the fact that he was world's strongest man, right? That alone says enough. The biggest thing I think that Gary had working against him was his size and the fact that basically he came along in the middle of Magnus or Magnussen's dominance. So when you look at genetics and Magnus for Magnussen, I think I'm going to wind up sticking Gary Taylor into the unlucky category. Again, that does not mean he's worse than the B plus players or the A plus players you can talk about. But when I think about Gary Taylor, the biggest thing that I'm thinking of is just unlucky. And that's a combination of the genetics and the Magnus for Magnussen factor. So, but the little man managed to win himself a World's Strongest Man title, and for that, you've got to respect him. After he wins his, that's when Magnus goes on and does his little three-peat. And then we go to Yokohama. Now, we just spoke about Gary Taylor. If we're going to talk about undersized combatants, we get another one right now, Yoko. He was taller than Gary, but he was not a very heavy man. He usually competed somewhere around 250 to 260 pounds. Where do they list him at on Strongman Archives? On Strongman Archives, they say 267. That may be true, but even that I believe is probably making him a little heavier. I think they're kind of doing the Gary Taylor height thing with Yoko's weight there. But he was a very, very small man in terms of today's standards. All of these guys are monsters today, right? Everyone's over 320, 350 pounds. They almost act like you have to be 330 plus pounds to do anything. They weren't quite as big in Yoko's day, but even when they were, he was one of the smaller guys there, and that did not keep him from not only winning once, but winning twice. He was in 22 international contests, and he won half of them. He won 11, and he competed in 3 World's Strongest Man finals and won 2 of the 3. Pretty impressive stuff, especially given, again, his size. I'm going to go ahead and put Yoko up here into the A plus players, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and move Jean-Paul Sigmarsson ahead of Jeff Capes in the A plus category. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and move Yokohama in front of Jeff Capes as well. So I'm going to let Jeff stay at A plus for now. But I believe that I'm going to say that Yoko was a better strongman. Next up, we have yet another Magnus. And Magnus Samuelsson, if he's known for stuff, obviously he's known for winning the World's Strongest Man title, right? But I think that what most people think about when they think of Magnus Samuelsson is probably they remember him breaking arms in an arm wrestling match. Nathan Jones. Nathan Jones. He broke Nathan Jones' arm. Nathan Jones was a huge Australian guy who wound up actually being in WWE wrestling for a short amount of time. And Nathan Jones was like just a real giant. Magnus Samuelsson was a huge dude, 6'7", 325, 335 pounds, right around there. And Nathan Jones made Magnus Samuelsson look small. So Nathan Jones, big dude. But they arm wrestled. And Magnus Samuelsson knew how to arm wrestle. And that's one of the reasons that I'm glad that we don't really see. I know there's a lot of people who follow my channel and follow strength sports on YouTube, follow the sport of strongman, who love arm wrestling as well, and that's fine. I'm glad that we don't really see that there anymore because I don't necessarily think that arm wrestling is it a test of strength? Yes, but it's not just a test of strength. There's so much technique that goes into that, and it can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, especially if you're taking on someone that does know what they're doing. And so Magnus just snapped Nathan Jones' arm. Really, I think Nathan kind of did it to himself. But I think that's probably one of the things that people think about when they think of Magnus Samuelsson is that arm break. Anyway, where am I going to put him? Where am I going to put him? Well, a lot of you guys are going to be mad at me for this. He competed in 10 finals, which is a lot. He won one of those. He had basically a 20% winning ratio on the international level, which is all right. At the time in Sweden, he was the man in Sweden, but on the international scene, he didn't usually reign as well. Um, and I know a lot of you guys are going to get mad, but some of these guys have to go there. I'm not going to call him fortunate. I'm not going to call him unlucky. I also don't think he was one of the main players. He's got that Magnus name, but it's a completely different Magnus. I think he's going to be the first person that arrives in the rest category. Now, to be honest, I was thinking we should probably have a lot of guys in the rest. That should, in my opinion, which doesn't mean nothing to anyone, I know that. The rest should probably be the biggest, and he's in terms of numbers of people there. Samuelson's the first guy who makes the rest in my book. So uh, hopefully he gets some company soon because it's kind of getting lonely hanging out there. But I think that's where we're going to drop Samuelsson. It's in the rest. After Samuelsson, we basically had. I should just be able to look down at the photos and see. Yanni Virtanen. Now, Yanni was a one time winner who was a perennial contender. You'd constantly hear his name if you were watching Strongman back when it was on ESPN's Saturday and Sunday mornings. It's like they'd show it like every weekend. They show the same 10 to 12 competitions almost on this cycle. And so if you loved it like I did, you got to watch Yanni Virtanen a lot because they kept showing the competitions that he was in. Um, that being said, Yanni was basically he won the one title. After winning the one title, um, I think he only made two podiums total, and that includes the win. Let me check on that. I don't want to be wrong. So he was in 9 finals. He won the one. Um, I'm only seeing two podiums, a first and a third, but let me check real quick. Okay, that's the group in the final. Uh, okay, second in 1999. Of course, he won in 2000. The third, so he had three podiums. Three podiums. Um, I think three podiums is good, but it's not good enough. He gets to join Magnus Samuelsson down here in the rest. That's where I'm going to put him. I will say something else about him though, is that he's another one of your guys that was under 300 pounds. And that's really saying something for him too, because Yanni was a tall man, like 6'6", 6'7", and he still weighed less than 300 pounds. So to make that thin of a frame work at this level of competition is pretty good. So we'll give him some credit there. Up next would be Sven Carlson, and Sven won in 2001. It was his lone victory. If we take a look at Sven's totals, he competed in 8 World's Strongest Man and made the finals 7 times with the one victory. He competed in 67 international contests, no, 64 international contests, 3 national contests. So almost everything he did was international. But back then, almost everything was international, to be honest. Basically, there were a few national competitions back then so that you could get invited to the World's Strongest Man, pretty much. Um, so Sven Carlson, he had the one win there. Let's see what other wins he had, because there's a couple things that popped in my mind, but they're not exactly super high notoriety. That's about what I figured was going to happen, you know. So I said we're going to start getting people here, and it appears to be happening now. Sven is going to go here. And you know what? I think this is really going to make a lot of Magnus Samuelsson fans, because I know there's a lot of them out there I just don't see. I'm actually going to go ahead and put Yanni ahead of Magnus Samuelsson. So that's what's happening right now. After this, we have a name that is sort of controversial, and I'll be honest, I think he's incredibly underrated. And I underrate him as well. Mariusz Pudzianowski is up next. He has more titles than anyone else. You can see that on the screen right where you're at, with 5 championships. No one else has done that. And most of us don't really think of him as one of those kings of the sport. And I may not put him up there in the gods of strength. So I do think um, I do think he is. I'll be honest. I think he's underrated by me and others. Especially not only was he 5 titles. If you look on the screen too, you'll see that in terms of most wins in a single final, no one has ever won more than 5 events in a championship before. Kazmaier did that twice. Pudzianowski and Phil Pfister each did it 1 time. So a lot of guys have won 4, but 5 is rarefied air. Kaz did it twice, and Puj did it once to go along with having won the thing 5 times. So that's pretty incredible. And I do think that we don't give him the credit that he deserves. It almost feels like I'm forcing myself to stick him up there in God of Strength, and I still don't know that I'm going to do it. The guy just can't seem to get any love. Um, man, oh man, oh man. Um, I'm going to let him set on the Gods of Strength. I may take him down at the end. I don't know, but he's done enough to have earned the right to at least be in that position for a moment. Flame me if you want to, or congratulate me because that's where he should have been all along, and you get tired of people overlooking him. I'll take either. But after we go through Marius, then we have Vasil Verstuk, one-time winner, and I'm definitely sticking him in the fortunate category. And I'm putting him there for a couple different reasons. Not only did he win in the middle of Marius' domination in the sport, but the one time that he did win, 2004, there was only a 6-man final. Now he did best Zadrunas in this competition, so he beat Zadrunas. This is before Zadrunas had won his first title, but when you look at who he competed against, that is a scalp that is on Vasil's mantle there. He can always say, hey, I beat Zadrunas Savickas. I beat Magnus Samuelsson. Now, the year that he won again, it was a 6-man final. So kind of lucky to do that. And I don't even know. Hold on one second. Let me check something here. Yeah, and so that is the year where Puig was disqualified as well. So there's a lot of things that went in the favor of Verastuk. So we're going to put him in that fortunate category. But if you look in that year, he's got he's got a championship. He's got scalps of Zadrunas Savickas, Magnus Samuelsson, and Mariusz Pudzianowski on his mantle. So a good year for him. Um, After that, we had Phil Pfister. Now, I was wondering what I was going to do with Phil when his name came up here. Phil is a very, very tough guy for me to rank. And he's a very tough guy because of the way his career was. If you look and you look at the years that he competed, he was at World's Strongest Man 8 times, was in the final 7 times. Of course, he only got the one victory. Now, earlier again, I said it's going to be hard for someone with one victory to get into the A plus category. And it is, and I told you there was someone who might get up there anyway. It wasn't Phil. It was not Phil. What makes Phil's case here interesting is yes, he's got the one victory. He competed in 28 international competitions, winning 3 of them. Competed in 5 national competitions, never winning a single one of those. But what makes Phil's interesting is his one win in 2006. You can see on the screen right there. He won 5 of those events. So he was sort of like a, if you could think about it like music, Phil was kind of a one-hit wonder. 2006 was his year. He was unstoppable in 2006. But outside of 2006, there's not a tremendous amount to brag about. Part of me is inclined to add him to our rest category, or maybe unlucky or fortunate. Any of those three. I almost feel like any category other than Gods of Strength or A plus, you could make a real argument for here. I don't really know where to put him. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put him at the top of B plus, based upon the fact that he's got the one championship, like the other 2 gentlemen there. But again, what a dominant performance in 2006 with 5 event wins. So I think that's where I'm going to put him. Again, reserve the right to change this in about 10 seconds if I so choose. Up next is Big Z. And there's not a question of if he's going into the Gods of Strength. The only question is, where does he belong on this list? I know that most people put him right there at the top spot. And by most, I mean some significant portion of people. I don't know. Again, Bill is my guy. And then after Bill, I don't want to talk too much until we get the next guy on there. But I essentially think that you have a few guys who are there. And so I feel like it's safe putting Big Z into the Gods of Strength category. I'm going to do that and stick him right there behind Bill Kazmaier. Maybe that's a bit of a homer pick, but it's my tier. I can do what I want. So Bill takes the title there, but Z gets himself up in that Gods of Strength, which means we now go to Brian Shaw. And again, Brian Shaw. It's not really a question of where he's going. It's a question of where do I put him up there. It's the exact same discussion with Big Z. And so earlier I started this thing by saying fortunate is not meant to be an insult to anyone, nor is the unlucky. It's just things that happen. But you can actually make an argument with fortunate that a lot of these guys belong in unlucky as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put Brian Shaw just behind Big Z. I know you guys were wondering, is he going at the top? Is he going ahead of Zydrunas because I'm sticking 2 Americans up there? Or because a lot of people do think that Brian is better than Big Z? But I'm going to go ahead and stick him behind Big Z. Now, I also said that 5 was the absolute number that I would put Gods of Strength. So Mary's being there, and I could just put 3 and drop both Magnus Magnuson and the Polish Power off of there, Mariusz Pudzianowski. I still may do all of that at the end. I don't know. What's really at play here, though, is again the fortunate unfortunate side of things. The biggest thing working against the number of titles that Big Z has is Brian Shaw. And the biggest thing working against the number of titles that Brian Shaw has is Big Z. If those 2 guys hadn't been in each other's path, how many championships would they have each won? You could even make an argument that maybe they were lucky to have each other, right? Because competition sort of brings out the best in each other. So Big Z might have actually been pushing Brian Shaw to other levels of greatness. And then Brian Shaw's greatness might have pushed Big Z to continue to do that. So they kind of leaned on each other, but also kind of probably kept each other from a lot more gold on their mantles at home. So it's very interesting. But so I've got Bill Kazmaier now, Big Z, Brian Shaw, Magnus Magnuson, and Mariusz Pudzianowski. Up next is Eddie Hall. Eddie Hall is what's Eddie Hall known for really? Obviously, he's known for that big deadlift. His major feud with Hafthór Bjornsson. And he was a good overhead presser and a great deadlifter. But I would very much say that Eddie was a specialist. Those were the things that he was super, super good at. Um, Excellent deadlifter, excellent overhead pressing power, struggled at many other things, but didn't struggle enough to keep him from winning. He won the World's Strongest Man once. He appeared in the finals 4 times, having to qualify all of those times. In the international scene, he competed in 23 international contests with 3 wins, 6 national titles in 8 contests, so a 75% winning percentage there in his own country. And then, of course, he has 4, I'm stealing this from Strongman Archives, he has 4 wins in single event contests, aka deadlifting competitions. So again, I think Eddie Hall is very much a specialist. And I thought about having a category on the tier called specialist, but I thought this was going to start looking a bit silly in terms of how tall it was, and it's already getting hard to fit things on there. So the question is, where do I put Eddie? And I think Eddie is sort of, he's got a big following in the sport. He's helped the sport grow. He's an entertaining guy. And if you help the sport grow and you're influential, to me, that's sort of one of the things that increases your legendary status, sort of makes you an A plus or a god of strength. But I actually really think the gods of strength, you can make a more of an argument there for guys who are influential than necessarily A plus. I'm thinking the A plus are it's more really about what they did and less about their impact. Most of the gods of strength are naturally going to be super super good as well. But it's possible that you could be a quote unquote god of strength without being in that A plus category just because of what you have done for the sport. And Eddie has definitely helped grow the sport. But when I think about everything, and I know this is going to make a lot of people upset, I really think that when I think of Eddie Hall, I think he's fortunate in that he could do so much by being a specialist and compete so well. But I also think that he's unlucky. I think he's unlucky that he was competing against prime Hafthór Bjornssons and Brian Shaw's. So I really think that I really think that's where I'm going to put Eddie Hall. I think he's just a bit unlucky. During some other years, I think he might have more than one title, even being a guy who really kind of specialized in deadlift and pressing. Now that brings us to Hafthór Bjornsson. Now, again, I said earlier, it's going to be very, very hard to get in the A plus category if you have one championship. Very, very hard. But then I started thinking, there's a name that comes to mind that could wind up being there, even if he only has the one title, and that was Hafthór. You could also make that same argument that I was just making about Eddie in terms of what they've done for the sport, growth of the sport, helping it grow, notoriety, things. Because, Hafthór had a long run on one of the world's most popular TV shows. So, big following, big growth of the sport, super influential. So I feel like if I put down the gauntlet and say, no, you cannot be an A plus player. If I say you can't be an A plus player unless you've had multiple wins, then I almost feel like I have to put him in Gods of Strength and kick one of the other guys out. If I say you can be an A plus player, I still may think God of Strength because, again, the influence that you can get with that outside of performance. I don't really know. Basically, what I'm trying to tell you is he is either a B plus player and be at the very top of it, or he's an A plus player, probably at the very top of it or near the very top of it, or he's a god of strength based upon what he's done outside of the sport and the impact that he's made within it. It's a very interesting case. I could put Hafthór in all of those different locations. I think I'm going to go with A plus player, even though, and he'll be the only A plus player with one title. And the reason for that is, yes, he only has the one championship, but he also has 3 second place finishes. Hafthór won in 2018, which we all know about 2018 and everything there. We're not going to relive it for this. But he also finished second in 2017. He finished second in 2016. He finished third in 2015. He finished second in 2014. Finished third in 2013 and 2012 as well. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 competitions, 7 World's Strongest Men in a row World's Strongest Men's, World's Strongest Man's, World's Strongest Men events, World's Strongest Men. I don't know how to say that. I don't know what the plural when you're talking about the guys in the event is. Anyway, 7 years in a row that Hafthór stood on that podium. So, in spite of only one victory, in my opinion, that kind of domination, that kind of success, makes him an A-plus player, and it actually puts him ahead of Jean-Paul Sigmarsson. Again, feel free to flame me and everything else. I think what this also does is it kicks Jeff Capes down to B plus, ahead of him there. Yeah, I think I'll still give Fister the top of the B plus by virtue of the 5. And now, boom, we've now got 3 guys in every category except the Gods of Strength, which probably should be the hardest group to get into, and it's the biggest group. All right, Martins Lisis. Oh boy, the Dragon. All right, once he's on our list, he's going to be here, there, and everywhere, but I'm not exactly sure where to put him. When you're here, there, and everywhere, it seems like that's the definition of the rest, right? But Martins won once, 2019. He has made up one other podium. That was 2022. He finished second. And he's really been the biggest thing that's worked against Martins has really been trying to stay healthy. He has had a tremendous amount of time staying healthy. And of course, he's competed in eras when, oh my goodness, the level of competition that he's had to fight has been crazy. For all of these reasons, I believe I'm going to say that Martins Lisis is in our unlucky category, and he is probably the best of the unlucky category, which you could make an argument that means he's the unluckiest. Um, if the man could have stayed healthy, very possible he might have more than one title. If he wasn't competing against some of the guys he was, very possible more than one title. But I think that's where I'm putting Martins. Unlucky. That brings us to the Ukrainian Alexei Novikov. Alexei. Okay, so Alexei has now won one title, and he has a total of 3 podiums, a first and 2 thirds. I believe, I don't want to be wrong, I got third this year and third last year. I think that's it. Yeah, so 3 total podiums, a victory in 2020, and then a third this year and a third last year. And on the international scene, Alexei has been amazing. Um, hmm. Oh boy. We've now come to the time where everybody starts getting angry and upset. Angry and upset. No matter where I put these guys, people are going to get upset. Oh boy, I don't know. Um, I think I'm going to go right there. I know a lot of people think that Jean-Paul Sigmarsson is a god of strength, and they're going to be upset that he's not there. I just don't have him there. I think that he's an A-plus player who was kind of fortunate in some of the competitions he was in and who wasn't in them, and so on and so forth. Um, yeah, I think I'm gonna put Alexei in A plus. No, I can't. I can't have another guy with only one victory there. Oh boy, Alexei. Oh, this is getting so hard. Again, Alexei could be another one of these guys that are unlucky. Virtually all of these guys that are competing today are unlucky. The field is just so stacked and so hard. Um, oh boy. Okay. Um, no, I'm gonna change my mind. He is gonna go after that. Yoko with 2 wins will be the only person in the B plus category with multiple wins. Yeah, yeah. And again, the Yoko thing, you've got that whole unfortunate, unlucky size, competition, all that stuff. But I think we're going to give Yoko the honor. We're not going to look at it as a demotion. We're going to give Yoko the honor of being at the top of that tier right there. Um, I'm going to say that Alexei is A plus, more well rounded. Also, another little guy doing incredible things. and he's a little guy doing incredible things against a level of competition really that Yoko didn't have to face. The competition that Alexei is up against these days is definitely bigger. Now we go to Tom Stoltman. Back-to-back wins in 2021 and 2022. Finished second this year, just behind the phenom Mitchell Hooper. I believe Tom Stoltman goes to the top of my A plus or behind. He he beats Thor. Thor beats him. He beats Thor. Thor beats him. I'm torn. I'm torn. I'm torn. I'm torn. So here's what I'm going to do. This is going to be controversial, but the entire thing is going to be controversial, right? Because this is ranking the world's strongest man guys, and not just ranking strongman. I'm actually going to say that Hafthór is a better strongman than Tom Stoltman, and has had a lot more success outside of World's Strongest Man. But this is World's Strongest Man. Tom has 2 victories, whereas Hafthór only has 1. Now again, Hafthór's been on that podium 7 times, whereas Tom Stoltman has been on the podium 4 times. Stoltman made the podium in 2020, wins it in 21-22, and then goes back to second in 2023. So 2 firsts and 2 seconds. Is 2 firsts enough to put him over Hafthór's 4 third place finishes? You know what? I think it is. And again, I'm on record as saying that I actually think that Hafthór is a better strongman than Tom Stoltman. But this is about World's Strongest Man champions. Tom has 2 victories. He's never sat in that third place position. He's either been first or second. And so, yeah, I think I'm going to set Tom at the top of the A+. That means there's only one man left here. Mitchell Hooper. When this is all said and done, this guy may be at the top. When Mitchell Hooper is said and done, he may be very much a god of strength. He may be the best of all time. We don't know yet. We don't know yet. Right now I'm putting him in the rest, not because that's where he's being left, but it's because I want to drag my screen around here to fix some things. Sorry about that. We'll figure out a position for Mitchell in just a second. Okay. When all is said and done, Mitchell Hooper may wind up being the best to ever do it. Right now what he is, he's a phenom who came out of nowhere, gets invited to the World's Strongest Man with no real record to speak of, prevents Brian Shaw from winning the qualifier for the first time in over a decade, and finishes in the competition in the finals. Actually even though he didn't do that great in the finals, he picked up some wins. Looked pretty good. Came from out of nowhere. Had 1 year to really, since then, to improve. And he comes out and wins it all this year. The only problem that I have with Mitchell is it's such a short-lived thing. We need to see more from him, and more from him at World's Strongest Man, to know where to put him. And I will say, before I decide where I'm going to drop him here, here's what I'm going to say about him. Right now, Mitchell Hooper, he won 4 events this year. That is crazy. He won 4 events at the 2023 World's Strongest Man. He won the shield carry. He won the deadlift for reps. He shared the victory for max dumbbell. He won the bus pull. Just kind of smashed that in comparison to everyone else. And finished only second to the one and only Tom Stoltman in the Atlas Stones. His one other appearance in 2022 was the first real competition. The only other thing that we have to speak about him, he won the Giants medley, so he picked up a victory in the first event in his first final. He sort of collapsed after that. We could say maybe he was burnt out, didn't have enough. I don't know what it was. Could have been nerves, could have been all kinds of things. I don't know. But he has 5 event wins in 2 years of a career. Not in 2 World's Strongest Man, not picking out his best 2. He has 5 event wins in a 2-year career. really a 1 year career because it was basically a 0 year career when he started last year. In addition to that, he's went on in the last year and he won the Arnold UK. He won the Giants Live, the 2022 Giants Live World Tour Finals. He won the Australia International Strongest International, and he won the Arnold Strongman Classic. So he won the Arnold UK last year, and then he won the Arnold Strongman Classic. Then he comes ahead and wins the World's Strongest Man. He may wind up, like I said, being the best to ever do it. As the World's Strongest Man, we're going to need a bigger track record. So for these reasons, this guy who might wind up being the best of all time, I'm actually going to stick him at the top of unlucky. And I'm sticking him at the top of unlucky for the following reasons. There's nothing unlucky about his performance, right? But he's kind of creating his own luck. But that's not lucky either. The reason he's unlucky is I'd say he's unlucky that we're grading and making this tier in 2023 instead of 2025 or 2026. I fully expect Mitchell Hooper's position in this to be in that A plus player Gods of Strength category very, very shortly. It's just such a small sample size at this point that I need to see more. I need to see more. What I have seen has been amazing. Otherworldly. Never seen anything like it, to be honest. But we need to see more. So he's unlucky in that I happen to be making the tier now rather than a few years later. But we might revisit it then and see where he's at. So let's take a look at this and see if there's anybody I really feel like moving around. Okay, as I'm looking to see who to move around, I think what I'm going to do, and again, I understand that none of this without controversy. Most of you aren't going to agree with anything I did, or if you don't agree with one thing I did, you're going to automatically disagree with everything, because that's just the way the internet works. But I don't see you guys being brave enough to post these videos. Anyway, I think, so that I'm not going to be the same group of people that always misrates Marius, I'm going to keep him up there in Gods of Strength. What I am going to do is I'm going to take Magnus for Magnuson, and I'm going to put him at the top of the A plus players because I don't really want that many people up in the Gods of Strength. I really only want like 3 there, 4 at the very, very most. And so it was a matter of, at that point, do I drop both Pujanowski or do I drop Magnus and Pujanowski, or just one or the other? I'm going to leave Pujanowski up there because of the 5. And I'm going to bring Magnus down and put him at the top of the A plus category. So that's what we have. We got 4 guys in Gods of Strength. We have 5 guys at A plus, 4 B plus players, 3 fortunate fellas, 5 unlucky fellas, and 3 who couldn't really think of anything to say about them. That's my thoughts. Tell me in the comments how bad I did. See you soon.